And we are live. Amazing. All right. Welcome, Robin. I'm excited to get to know you. Excited to get to know your journey and your story. Just so you know, as of right now, I know basically your name and how you look, but that's it. Like, I know very little. And this is how I love to do these episodes. I just get to know people throughout as we talk. But even before you introduce yourself professionally and about what you do, and we'll get into that this week. What is it like to be you as a human being?
This week, well, first of all, thank you, Ondra. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And so this week, it's quite pleasant to be me, actually, and quite
Mm,
exciting. So
okay.
I'm having pretty high energy, high vibration, very joyful week overall. Quite productive also.
Okay. What makes it so exciting these days?
Just building up the business, connecting with people. Um, there's some stuff coming up. Like, I'm also a musician, so I have a performance coming up. So just
No.
a lot of practicing and rehearsing for that. And yeah, I'm just reaching out to other people a lot, just connecting with people, and having working, having sessions with clients, which have been going pretty well this week. So
Nice. All right. Good stuff. So you mentioned music, you mentioned some business, you mentioned clients as well, working with clients. So what is it that you actually do?
well, I am what I suppose what people like to call a life coach. So I like to call myself more like a courage and self-leadership coach. And
Okay.
so basically, what I do is I help people sort of try to do what I was lucky enough to sort of do, which is sort of I like to help people who are very talented, like and intelligent, and just know that they have a lot of potential, but experience like disproportionate levels of like low self-worth, anxiety, just fear, of showing themselves, of like really stepping into their strength. And so yeah, so basically with my coaching I try to help people like that to just overcome their fears, resolve their fears on a really deep level, and to then
Mm-hmm.
start taking courageous action and actually build the life or the business or whatever they want to achieve.
All right. Amazing. How long have you been doing this?
In this format, I started it this year actually. I've been working
Ah,
sort of
let's go.
in more of a yeah. This is why it's exciting. So
Yeah, right, right.
and I've been working in more of a therapeutic context, like part time, um, for almost 4 years now, I think. And now it's basically like this year I'm actually I used to work in video games actually, and but like I've quit that job now, and now I'm trying
Okay.
to build my own business, like a business that's more aligned with who I actually am.
Very nice. Very nice. So you're doing this full time now.
Pretty much, yeah.
Nice. Congrats. That's a big transition, you know, to go
Thank you.
from being an employee to being a full-time entrepreneur. And
Oh yeah.
it can be tough out here. So I'm really excited to have a conversation about this again. Even earlier today, I was chatting with somebody who's been a coach for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And so we had a great conversation about her journey and the reality versus the expectations versus reality of starting a business and what it's actually like and what it really takes and
Hmm.
what people promise and what it seems to be on social media and then the reality of it. And
Right.
this is one of the things that I'm always very excited about to talk about. But back to you, why did you start your own business and why did you start coaching specifically?
Well, basically, um, I was basically in the same situation that the people that I coach are, which is that I grew up with a lot of sort of emotional abuse in my family and really feeling very very low self worth. Like I was always kind of sensitive and creative, and yeah, but also just but if you're sensitive, you also get hurt easily. If you don't have the right support. So basically coming out of school, I was kind of thinking like, okay, well, the only thing I can imagine to do in this scary world is to do video games. And then so I actually went into
Mm.
animation and did quite that for some time. You know, I studied game design in Berlin, and it was fun. But then towards the end, like when I was actually doing working on my bachelor's thesis, I came down with a pretty bad case of hyperthyroidism. So I actually got sick, and
Okay.
I was realizing I'm in this really dark place where I feel like, oh my God, like I need to be my entire self-worth depends on me being good at animation. And I just realized all of these sort of these shadows coming up, so much anger, like so much resentment. And there was a point where I just had this realization that, okay, I got to do something here, because I think if I continue down this road, like this is going to kill me basically. And then I started doing therapy. I started diving into all kinds of spiritual practices, and it took me about a year. And then I had like a moment of realization where all of a sudden I realized that, wow, okay, like all of these bad things that I've been thinking about myself aren't true. And I actually, like, I have a place here, I have something to give, and I can do a lot more than making animations for video games. And so when I had that realization, like pretty quickly, I realized that, okay, I want to work with people. I want to help people heal and transform and actually realize that their self-worth, and that there is a place for them here in this world.
Mm.
And when I made that decision to go down that road, that sickness, the hyperthyroidism, vanished.
Wow.
Yeah,
Just because you changed direction in life.
yeah. It was basically
That's
my body
amazing.
telling me, "Man, you're on the wrong track."
Yeah.
And when I corrected the track, it was just like, okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing. I'm just gonna
Mm.
say my mentor Jose was watching, and he said, "Congrats, Robin. Very cool and exciting.
Thank you,
Very
Ondra.
exciting to start this journey and start helping people and creating impact." You said that you got into like spirituality, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What's your version or what's your vision of spirituality? What's helped you the most?
Um, it's sort of like I kind of pick different practices from different types of spirituality because I like to see what they have in common. Basically, like to me, all of the different forms of like spiritual systems, religions out there, ultimately they point to the same thing. It's just like the rituals and practices are slightly different, but ultimately it's about the same thing, which I think is ultimately the realization that basically there is no separation, and practically actually like all there really is love. And so very helpful for me, like Buddhism has been very helpful to me.
Nice.
I'm also a yoga teacher, so that's also a big part of my life. I really enjoy the Course in Miracles, actually, even though it's not for everyone, I think, but I like it. And I mean, Eckhart Tolle, of course.
Yes.
And
One of my
yeah, I mean,
favorites.
he's a really, really good, very accessible. I think Eckhart Tolle is a great place to start out when you're
Yeah.
interested in spiritual. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorites for sure. I read the Power of Now probably 10 times at this point, and
Mm,
it's the one physical book that I carry around even as I travel the world and
mm,
living out of a backpack. I can't really have many books, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that one always makes it with me, and I've had many very interesting experiences with the practice of those deeper meditations and things like that. And I'm diving into more um into deeper stuff in that as well, and into say more woo woo things as well. And so
Hmm.
I would be curious about that from you as well. I had somebody, this was I think yesterday or 2 days ago, on my podcast who has been practicing. Have you ever heard of the Jose Silva and the Silva Ultramind method?
I have not.
Okay, it's I'll just say like a little bit super quickly. It's this like um meditation and visualization techniques that work with brain waves to help you guide into, instead of operating at beta levels, to guide you into alpha levels and theta levels of
Mhm.
brain vibrations and brain waves. And um, they also work with like higher intelligence and developing ESP, like extrasensory perceptions, and some like almost psychic abilities in a way. And I had a
Okay.
chat with somebody on my podcast who's been practicing this and using this for 19 years. 19
Wow.
years of doing this every day. And she told me a
Hmm.
few stories of like what she's experienced and what she's done, and I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. I've always heard stories about this from like videos or even podcasts and things like that, but never really personally had the chat with a person like who's developed it to that extent. And it was really awesome
Hmm.
for me and very encouraging to dive deeper into these kinds of things as well, and the kinds
Hmm.
of changes and the kinds of growth that you can and experiences that you can have by working with the deeper parts of the brain and the superconscious mind and things like that, which is just super
Hmm.
fascinating to me. A couple of years ago, if you talk to me about these things, I would be like, nah, what the hell is that? Ugh,
Yeah.
get back to the Earth, get back to planet Earth. What are you talking about? But as you
Yes.
as you
Yes.
grow and explore, you kind of yeah, you learn and grow. I'm curious what it was like, and to come back to like the conversation. What was it like for you when you were in the transition of going from an employee to an entrepreneur and a coach?
It was scary as hell. Even though I sort of tried to make it as gradual as possible. So
Uh-huh.
I was lucky. I was working at a video game startup, and like my bosses were super chill and cool. Like we were basically like a big family. So they had no, and I was a very fast working animator. So I could just gradually like reduce my hours and spend more time, learning, taking trainings, practicing, and all these things. And yeah, but then that company went bankrupt last year, so that was kind
Mm,
of like was just pushing me out there, I suppose. And I was traveling at the time, like I traveled in Asia for 13 months last year, and
amazing.
so at first I was like, I was just completely in a different world, so it didn't matter. But when I came back to Germany, it was really like, oh shit, like what am I? Now I actually need to make money from this, and I'm not a really good business person, I think, at least. I'm trying to become one,
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
least to
yeah,
a certain extent, at least. But yeah, yeah. So at first, like I was super scared. Like there was a time where I was so anxious that I was almost, I actually lost direction. I was like, do I actually want to be doing this now?
yeah,
And yeah, and I had to drop really low once again, and then come back out of there to actually regain clarity and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing, and I'm just going to go for it now. So
yeah. Thanks for sharing that, because that's the reality of it. And I think most entrepreneurs, or almost all entrepreneurs, have to go through this to a certain extent, right? Everybody has their own journey, but that's where it comes down to expectations versus reality, right?
right.
And what we see on social media of what other people say and what gurus say, and then when you
Hmm.
get started, you're like, oh damn. So how was that for
Yeah.
you, like the expectations versus reality? What was different? What was the biggest difference between what you didn't expect, let's say?
Well, um, I guess I thought, I can kind of just I'm just going to be doing what when I got back to Germany, I thought, okay, I'll just be doing what I was doing before. I'll hand out some flyers and stuff like that, and I'm going to be fine. And I'll teach some yoga. And then I realized, okay, wow, I have barely any clients coming in, and and teaching yoga is actually pays very little for the energy that you put in. And yeah, so there definitely was a moment where I was like a scary moment where I was realizing, oh my God, this is not as easy as I thought it would be. And yeah, and then at some point I just realized, okay, it's going to take a big amount of energy and time for something to actually come back. And I need to, it's just about trusting, keep giving, basically, keep putting yourself out there, keep showing up, take every opportunity. connect, be generous, coach some people for free, get some testimonials, all these kinds of things. Just keep doing, and yeah, just know in your heart that this is your path, and don't be discouraged.
Yeah. What helped you push through, and what helped you persevere? What helps you still persevere?
Ultimately, well, apart from really great friends and family members who are extremely supportive,
Mm,
um, definitely, yeah, and also just being surrounded by a lot of people who are doing similar things.
mm,
I know a lot of coaches, a lot of people who are in some kind of healing profession or yoga teachers who are in similar situations. Um, but ultimately, also just I think spirituality. I think it takes a certain trust that if I follow my heart, I cannot go wrong. And also,
mm,
but also, I think at a certain point, you realize that okay, if my happiness, if my inner state, if I'm going to make that dependent on some kind of outer circumstance, be it that okay, this business is successful, spiritually, I would have I would still have lost basically. So ultimately, actually, I'm trying to get to a point where I just feel so connected to myself and this world, like and to love, that I actually feel like, okay, if this business fails, it doesn't matter. I don't need it to, my happiness, my fulfillment doesn't depend on this because I
mm,
already have it inside.
mm-hmm.
And I think that really is, yeah, that's just very reassuring, and it takes some pressure out of it. And yeah, and it makes the fear go away. That, and the second thing I think is not making it about myself, but actually reminding myself, I'm here to serve, I'm here to
Mm,
help others, here to give, and I'm not, and that is my primary motivation. Not that okay, I want to make loads of money, or I want to be the big savior, like the great coach who's helping somebody. No, it's actually like I have something to give, and hopefully, like it's going to sustain myself. But
yeah.
that's just like just on a side at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the right approach in avoiding becoming one of them gurus who are like over promising and under delivering, and
Mm,
maybe making some some good money on the front end, but then ruining their reputation and ruining other people's lives even by
mm,
selling crap. So it's really good to hear that you're coming out of service and that you just really want to give and you want to help people. I'm curious. Maybe we can shift a little bit into the business side of things, because this
mm,
is what I struggled with a lot when I started almost 5 years ago, right? And I struggled a lot with figuring out like the niche and figuring out the marketing and figuring out like what is lead generation, what is sales calls and things like that, right? Um,
mm.
but I'm gonna start here. I'm curious, who's your ideal client these days? Who do you want to serve the most?
I want to serve people who are very sensitive, talented, intelligent, probably also spiritual, but like, um, and who just know that okay, like I have a lot to give, but I'm scared, I'm scared of like transitioning, to a new life. I'm scared of really showing the world what I can do, and yeah, and just helping these people to resolve their fears and become courageous and actually get into stepping up and giving whatever they have to give to the world. And
Yeah,
I feel like I'm maybe I should be narrowing this niche down a little bit more, but I'm sort of still figuring that out at the moment. But
yeah.
basically, the basic idea is, I want to people who struggle a lot with anxiety and fear. I want to help them become courageous.
Okay, yeah. It's a good place to start. I think this is again like what I struggled with a lot, and what a lot of people struggle with as well when they kind of get started. I see this a lot of it, and the thing is, it just takes a while to really dial it down. I think it like it, and I'm still refining it myself after 5 years. Imagine that. But um, it took me definitely like a few years to be like, okay, like this is where exactly I am, and I shifted it from here to there, and then okay, well, I want to serve these kind of people, but also these kind of people, and this way, and so like it really um, is tough to put the words on it in a way that other people, and this is really like what niching down I think means, is being able to communicate it in a way that when people hear it, they're like, yes, that's me, that's exactly what I want to do, that's exactly what I struggle with. And when you put these broad generic terms, people don't really connect with that, and it makes total sense to us because like it's your journey. It makes total sense to you because you're in it, you know what you're trying to say, but people really don't get it. And if they don't get it, then if people are confused, they will just definitely not want to reach out or
Right.
interact or sign up, right? And yeah, so people need to first of all feel understood, feel understood, and that's also when it comes down to the niching down, right? Like if you're talking about something that people can really be like, oh damn, like Robin here, he understands me because he's went through the same thing that I'm going through right now. He really understands, so that means he can help me, right?
Hmm.
And people take action and people take advice from you when they feel understood, not when they feel, not when they understand you, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
that's
was a
very
big
true.
one. That was a big one that I had to learn because like you can approach this from like, hey, like this, be trying to be impressive and trying to give the best advice, but if people might be like, yeah, good for you, right? But it doesn't really connect, and it's these little things, little ways of shifting how you speak and how you communicate and how you show up, and that comes over time, of course, with and with guidance and coaching and getting feedback and market research and all of these things. And this is one of the reasons why I take a very big issue in the coaching industry, and I talk about this a lot these days, but I will repeat it again. I take a big issue with the timelines that people are putting out there. Like start a coaching business today and make 10,000 a month in 3 months, or in 6 months,
Yeah.
or 90 days, 180 days, like those kinds of ridiculously unrealistic
Yeah.
timelines. And when you start doing it, you're like, damn, like this is, whoa, like this is not even close, right?
Mm.
And especially if people say with no experience, right? I have met people who have started businesses and within 6 months they were making six figures. I have met people like that on my podcast or even other places. But guess what? When you talk to them a little bit more, they will tell you, yeah, but I remember this one lady, and she said, yeah, I started my online business, and within 6 months I was doing six figures. I'm like, that's really amazing, like big congratulations. Why do you think that was? Like, how did you do that? And she was like, well, I had this other business before that was making seven figures. I'm like, oh, right. It wasn't online, it was a brick and mortar business, but all you had to do is kind of transfer and learn the extra things online and
Right.
realign what you already knew into the online world. So of course you can make it so much faster. But if you
Hmm.
don't know anything, how people market it, no experience, there's very, very, very small chance. And the reality is, and that's a part of the reality is that it's a part of the journey to tweak and try this for 2 months, and that's not going to work, so change it a little bit and try this for a couple months, and that's maybe not going to work, and try this for a couple months, and maybe that's not going to work, and you figure it out, and it just takes longer, and it's supposed to be this way.
Hmm.
So you are, even if you've started and you feel like it's not really working out, or you get stuck somewhere, just know that you are on the right path. It is a part of the journey, and all you have to do is just keep going. My mentor Jose, who was listening in earlier, he also says that he told me this: the number one rule of business is to stay in business. I'm like, huh? What do you mean? Most people quit way too early. So the number one rule, if you want to make it in business, is to stay in business, and then the second rule is to make profit. But it's the second priority. The first one is to stay in business until you're making the profits. And I think a lot of people don't follow this. And that's why so many businesses fail, and that's why so many coaches fail in the beginning.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I'm glad to hear that you're persevering and that you're pushing through and you're figuring things out. Definitely keep going. It sounds like you're on the right path.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a great training, like just to build your character and also just spiritually, it's a huge exercise in trust and ultimately, like, even if I were to fail, like, I think the things that I learn, like, just on a personal level, that are coming out of this are going to be totally worth it. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think
yeah.
that's always a good perspective to have as well. So let's shift again a little bit towards. You said you want to help people with anxieties, especially, right? Anxiety and maybe overwhelm, and they want to get themselves out there. So what's your best advice to somebody who's like really struggling with anxiety?
Well, first of all, just realize that, when you're feeling anxious, you're watching the world through a certain set of glasses, and everything is going to look scary to you. And because like speaking from a more spiritual perspective, it's like because love is the opposite of fear. So if you're feeling totally identified with your anxiety and your fear, you are basically cut off from your essence. So you need to basically find a way to reconnect with that. And the first thing is to stop identifying with whatever part of you feels anxious. And then the next step would be to stop identifying with any part of you who wants to get rid of the anxiety, because that's also not really you. Because deep down, when you go to your real self, your deeper self, your higher self, that self has no need to get rid of the anxiety because it doesn't really have an agenda. It's just peaceful. It is just content by itself. So I think the first thing to do would be to just sit quietly and maybe do some breathing exercises to sort of slightly calm down the nervous system until you get to a point where you feel like, yeah, I can sort of inwardly step back and just watch and get to know this feeling of anxiety and realizing, okay, this is like, you're flying through a cloud of anxiety that sort of tints the entire world in a certain way, but it's just a cloud. And if you just keep going, keep being steady, knowing that, okay, everything I'm thinking right now is probably wrong because my thoughts are coming out of anxiety. So I'm going to tell myself all sorts of scary stories.
Yeah,
So ideally, just okay, meditate, focus on your breath. Don't think, don't believe your thoughts. Keep going, and as much as you can, try to sort of just be compassionate for yourself. Be compassionate for the anxiety. Be compassionate for any part of yourself that that is suffering from this because of the anxiety. That feels like, oh God, feeling anxious is terrible. And that way, just slowly reintroducing some love into your system. And eventually, that's going to resolve the anxiety. And that veil, that cloud is going to lift, and you're going to be looking at a whole new different world, and you'll be seeing
yeah,
opportunities.
I totally agree. And I help people with social anxiety as one of my primary offers. Right. So this is right up my alley. This has been my journey, and I struggle very badly with my own social anxiety and things like that. And so, based on what you said and what I see is the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to dealing with anxiety is that they want to hide away from it and run away from it. From the lens of,
Mm,
say, specifically social anxiety in my case, and what I see is, let's say, super clear symptom is really, you can really understand this, you can really see this. Somebody will come to me and they will ask me this kind of question: hey, I have social anxiety, what jobs do you recommend to somebody who has social anxiety? Well, that's a big problem,
okay.
because that means that they've just completely accepted I just have social anxiety, and I now have to recreate my life based on what's not going to trigger me. So it's limiting your whole reality now, and you've allowed it. and you're just trying to hide away from it and be like, okay, I just don't want to trigger it, and but it's still gonna be there and it's just gonna grow. So the approach, I believe, has to be, no, I have to put myself through the anxiety, through the emotions, go through it and overcome it so then it doesn't control my life anymore. And the way through is exactly what you said. Center yourself, take a breath, don't try and fight it. Like, it doesn't mean, oh, just pushing through it, right? It really means taking a few breaths. And that's always where it has to start. Taking deep breaths, right? Because anxiety is literally physical symptoms of breathing really shallow. Like, if you see somebody who's in anxiety, who's experiencing anxiety right now, they will always breathe very shallow, and
Hmm.
they will be stuck in their head. So exactly what you said: breathe and don't listen to your brain for a minute. Ignore, try and ignore your brain. And of course, this is where I think we have to add that when you say don't listen to your thoughts or don't think, what is the first thing that your brain automatically does? Starts thinking more, right? And you start focusing on the things more. So it goes. There's a saying that is very universal, and it says, "Where focus goes, energy flows." So if you focus on don't listen to my don't no don't think, don't listen to my thoughts, don't have anxious thoughts, you're gonna have more anxious thoughts. The way is to focus on the breath, and that way you will the thoughts will quiet down because you're not giving them the energy, you're not giving them the focus. Really focus on the breath. What I like to do is focus on my hands and focus on the like little tingling at my fingers, or I will even start by doing this if I cannot really feel it, so then I can feel the touches, and I would just close my eyes, breathe, and like feel my fingers and feel the sensations in my hands, and that helps me
Hmm.
get more into my body, into the sensations of it, and then I can go deeper into what Eckhart talks about, right? Inner body meditations and things like that. So I'm curious, how has this impacted your life when you learned this about anxiety and when you started approaching anxiety this way?
Um, it's been a huge shift, I think. And I think realizing that, anxiety is something that you can just, you know, go through, it's not going to kill you. And also that, the world is just, it looks, the reason why you're perceiving the world as, scary or whatever is because you're feeling anxious. And then realizing that, okay, there are ways to get out of that is incredibly empowering, because all of a sudden you realize that it's okay, fear is something that can be overcome or that can be resolved. Fear is something that doesn't have to hold me back. And when you realize this, then it actually means, I can do whatever I want, basically. You know, I don't, and at a certain point, when you get used to facing your fears again and again and again, you start to get better at it, and you become able to be so much more creative about what you do with your life, and it's incredibly empowering, and it boosts your confidence incredibly, and it also frees you up to just be a more loving person, I think, to be more open-hearted, to be more vulnerable, because you are less afraid, and that will give you deeper connections with other people and ultimately make you better at whatever you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally agree. It is really wonderful when you go through the fear and when you become less afraid, what kind of opportunities and how the world opens up to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
all of these other amazing things can start to happen. And again, it's like the complete opposite of the approach that I see a lot when people say, I have social anxiety, what kind of job can I get that's not going to trigger my social anxiety? Right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
exact opposite, because then you can choose whatever job you want. You can build whatever business you want. You can go travel the world. You can go talk to strangers if you want. Like, it, the world completely opens up to you, right? And that's the
Yeah.
wonderful piece.
Yeah. Yeah. You shouldn't move away from fear. You should move towards fear because that's where the growth is.
Yeah.
That is the border of what you think is possible for yourself. And if you keep pushing that border, then just you're inviting
Yeah.
all sorts of opportunity into your life.
It's really about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and going through
Yeah.
it rather than trying to run away from it. I couldn't agree more, I think. And yeah, it's definitely like, when I reflect on my journey, it's definitely been this common theme of it ever since when I was, I mean, it started a little bit earlier. I'm not gonna go into the details, but when I was 15, I decided that I'm really going to challenge my social anxiety and I'm gonna like go through the fear. And I decided that I'm gonna introduce myself to girls on the bus on my way to school.
Mm.
And so that experience of going through that and pushing through that and failing many times, and embarrassing myself, and but then finally doing it and becoming pretty good at just meeting strangers and talking to strangers in buses and in parks and things like that. Like, I got almost addicted to going outside of my comfort zone this way and seeing like, oh, what else can I do, right? What else can I do? Because this used to feel impossible for me. And then, so when it came to starting a business later, a bunch of years later, like you said, it's scary as heck, right? It's super scary. But because we've already trained ourselves to do the scary thing, and we know that on the opposite side of the fear is the freedom, or is the growth, is the opportunities, it becomes much easier to actually do it.
Yeah, definitely. Hmm.
Is there is there anything else, more specific, that you coach or want to coach people on, except anxiety and dealing with these, with fear and emotions?
Well, there's this whole concept of self-leadership that I
Mm.
really like. This
Okay.
is a concept from internal family systems therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the main sort of methods that I use in my coaching. And it's just this idea that, um, okay, basically like our mind is made out of a whole family of different personality parts. You have your
Mm.
inner critic, you have inner children, you have
Yes.
your anxious part, whatever. But there's also a self with a capital S, which is more like this sort of loving presence. That's not really that's not really a part, that doesn't really want anything. That is just sort of limitless, naturally connected, to everything. And when people learn to sort of stop identifying with their parts, with their ego essentially, and to access the self, they naturally become compassionate, they naturally become courageous, they naturally become creative, and all of these, wonderful qualities start to emerge. And so I just, and I really like this idea that, okay, you want to be able to lead yourself, your inner world from a place of self, so that you have, on the one hand, really great awareness of what's going on, and the ability to shift out of whatever part or feeling is currently present for you, and to, yeah, just lead your life from a deeper level, where your view of the world is not distorted by anxieties or desires or whatever, so you can really see clearly what's going on and make a very informed and also responsible and ultimately, caring, loving decision on what it is you want to be doing. So I'm thinking maybe to come up with something maybe for like young leaders or something like that, to
Mm.
just to be able to become better leaders of their inner world first, so that they
Mm.
can become better leaders in the outer world.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I love that, because one of my one of my best friends, he's been a coach for a long time as well. We're actually launching a group program together next year, like in January. Super hyped about it. Super excited. And he loves this parts work, and these, he especially loves working with the inner super supporter and inner critic. And so one of the first things that he always does with people is like helping them name their super supporter and their inner critic, and giving them space to express, and things like that. And it can be really, 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 really powerful. And I've seen it, and I've been to a few workshops, that he's hosted when people do this, and when they It's funny when we talk about this. What I've seen is people very often have a very loud inner critic, and it's so easy for them to get into the mode of that. But
Yeah.
when you ask them, what about your super supporter? What does your super supporter have to say? It's hard for people to access that, and it's hard for
Hmm.
people to even give them a name or to channel them in a way that like giving yourself a pep talk or encouraging yourself through that part of you because it's so pushed down for so many people. And yeah, I've definitely seen that. So it can be a very powerful retraining and reprogramming
Yeah.
your brain in a way.
Hmm.
How did
Yeah,
how did you
absolutely.
how did you discover this internal family systems? I think it's called, right?
Yes. Well, the first coaching or therapy training I ever did was in hypnosystemic therapy and coaching, and sort
Okay.
of parts work was just one part of that. And it wasn't quite internal family systems. It was a more, I think, what they do in hypnotherapy, something similar though. And I was so impressed by it, just the fact that, wow, okay, so I have a feeling here, and I can just sort of invite it to sit down with me and have a talk with it. And it's going to give me really insightful answers. That was so mind blowing to me because it's so direct, it's so to the point. There's no speculation. You're just basically asking and working with whatever is there. And then coming out of that training, I felt like I could just be working with this. Like this puts everything else that was part of this training almost into like makes it seem a little superfluous. Well, not quite, but and then I think a few years later, thanks to my sister, who's a clinical psychologist, I discovered internal family systems. Like I saw well, she sent me like a talk by Richard Schwartz, who is the founder of it, and I was hooked immediately because I realized, okay, here's an entire system that's just parts worked. It's super refined, it's super thought out, and it goes much deeper than what I learned. And I
Yeah.
just knew that, okay, yeah, I want to learn this.
Hmm. All right. Very nice. Yeah, I think it can be one of the very powerful modalities or powerful ways to deal with yourself and to also help other people and coach other people. Um, for sure. Do you have any of your own practices, how you implement this and how you do this with yourself?
You mean internal family systems for me,
Yes.
or
Yes. Yeah.
yeah?
Like working with your own parts.
Hmm. Well, the first thing is just like cultivating awareness
Mm.
and the ability to just stop identifying and sort of separating from parts. So just realizing, okay, rather than thinking, okay, I'm angry right now or I'm anxious, being like, a part of me is anxious. Interesting. And that just puts you like in a completely different position where you're not trapped in it, but you can actually engage with it and see what's going on. And this also helps a lot with communication. If you say somebody, hey, to someone, hey, I'm really angry at you. But if you're feeling like, hey, just part of me is really angry, that immediately sort of is a much more, is a completely more like open energy. And yeah, so one thing I like to do is just like in the morning, just checking in with whatever is present for me, after waking up and just seeing, okay, is there any part of me that needs some attention, that needs anything basically. Just seeing, okay, what are my needs right now? Like really. And also what I like to do in the evening is to just sit down and think, okay, what did I do today? And which parts of me enabled me to do that?
Mm.
Because we have a lot of parts, like manager parts, who manage our lives, who make things happen for us, and all of these kinds of things. And we kind of take them for granted, but actually really thinking like, okay, yeah, there was a part of me that actually got me out of bed at 5 in the morning to go to yoga practice. That, and I'm not a morning person, so I mean, and then just really thanking all of these parts for the work they
Mm.
do, and that thing is basically a more sophisticated form of self-love and just
Mm.
being grateful for yourself. and it can trick it because when you're starting your business, you're working all the time, right? And and doing this sort of, I think, it creates this container of love and gratitude for what you're doing, but at the same time, all while staying productive at the same time.
Yeah, you're giving space to all of the parts that are helping you build this thing and build your life and live your life. I like that. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Giving space
it's
and
self appreciation.
celebrating. Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
self appreciation. Mm, all right. That's really awesome. What is what is next for you in this journey?
Well, I mean, January is coming up, so right now, I'm kind of um, starting to be a bit more active on social media, and I'm just figuring
Mm-hmm.
that out, figuring out, okay, how can I do this in a way that's authentic, and how can I create workflows for myself to sort of keep this
Mm-hmm.
up, and then I'm also going to start giving more workshops because I actually also just like to do stuff with people live or on site even. So I
Oh, really?
am currently preparing to start some, self-leadership workshops, some workshops on, befriending your fear, just teaching people how to connect with these things, and yeah, so stuff like this. So right now it's a lot about actually just finding more ways to show up and to make myself visible. I think
Yeah.
is the most important thing, right?
Okay. And you said you want to do in-person workshops as well, like local?
Yeah, I'd like to. Hmm.
Nice. Good stuff. Very good stuff. Yeah, becoming more visible on social media is a journey in and of itself. That
Hmm.
yeah, I'm wishing you all the best. I'm definitely looking forward to following you and staying in touch and seeing if I can also help you in any way, if I can connect you with somebody that might be able um to help you grow and expand and things like this. And you also mentioned that you traveled around Asia quite a lot. I live in Vietnam these days.
Hmm.
I've traveled, with my business. I've traveled by myself around Asia and around. I went to the US a little bit as well, and of course I'm from the Czech Republic originally, so I traveled around Europe quite a bit. Um, I've been to about 22 countries total, probably around 17, 18 countries with my business after I quit my job and started doing this. And it took me just I like to just tell the reality. It took me about 2 years to go from starting my business to quitting my job and starting to do it full time in in a somewhat sustainable way, right? Because there's a lot of ups and downs, and if you wanted to, you can go through my social media if in the past year, and I've shared like the reality. I like to share the more of the reality of like what it's actually like to live this way and to do this. So there's a lot of ups and downs and struggles that come with it, But yeah, it's been quite an amazing and a fascinating journey, and I'm always happy to talk more and connect and stay in touch and see how we can help each other or do another episode more focused on something else. Once you launch your workshops or you have a launch or something like that, I would be happy to do that as well and talk more specifics and just see how you've grown, in the next year. I think that's going to be very valuable for people to see as well, as in like seeing. And that was always my big belief because a lot of the times people are like, I'm not good enough to do this yet. I'm not good enough to show up on podcasts, or I'm not good enough to start making videos. I'm just getting started. I need to become this and this first. And I think it's much more valuable to also start showing up ASAP, even but not trying to pretend like you've already made it, like you've just been doing, right? That you're just honest. This is where I'm at. This is what I help people with, and this is what I'm trying to figure out. This is where I'm growing, and that was always the way I showed up. And now I have people who've been following me for let's say 4 years since I started, right? And then they reach out to me and they're like, "Yeah, I remember when I saw saw your video for the first time, and I started following you a little bit, like back in 2020 when you were getting started. And man, I can't believe how far you've come. It's been really awesome to watch your journey and." watch you go through the ups and downs and things like this. And first of all, congratulations so much. And how can we work together? Or like, how, this is what I'm struggling with. I think you can help me because I've seen you do these things in the last 4 years. And so doing it in somewhat of a public eye, where you can say, like, yeah, 4 years ago or a year ago, 2 years ago, I went on this podcast and this is where I was, and now a year later, you can compare those, right? And people react to that very well, to see, oh, like, you know he's actually grown, because a lot of the times it's easy to assume, and our brain always does this, when you see somebody who's like, they've made it, right? And it seems like they've always been that way, or they just got lucky with the business, or they kind of just were born with being better or different or whatever. But when you see the person going through it, that's where it becomes so much more powerful. And so thank you so much for showing up, thank you for sharing your journey honestly, and keep going, man. Keep going. You're gonna do great things.
Thank you, Ondra. Thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Would you have any closing remarks or closing statements to leave people with?
Well, basically, I agree with everything you just said. I think it's, you don't have to be, great to start. You have to start to be great. And, if you want to get good at something, you just have to suck at it long enough, basically. And yeah, and really, think, whatever, you want to feel, you can feel right now. So, don't make your happiness dependent on whatever happens on the outside, because it's also always going to be volatile. Find find within what you're looking for on the outside, and then it's going to manifest on the outside as well. So
Amazing.
basically, look
All right.
inward first. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Amazing. I will add towards the beginning that if there's anybody who wants to get started or who's thinking about getting started, or you've started recently, connect with either me or Robin, and start building relationships, start building a little bit of a community. I'm personally also hosting an open mic event every Saturday virtually, where you can go to connect with awesome people. You can practice your speaking, you can practice sharing your story, you can practice giving people tips and showing up more confidently on camera or on video and on conferences. Always, always, always very valuable to practice your storytelling, no matter how many times you've done it. So that's a platform that I'm growing, that I'm excited to have people on and connect over there in a little bit of a different way, in a different way than these podcasts. And also, if there's anybody who's thinking about starting a coaching business, and you're inspired by this conversation that we just had, and you're like, okay, I know that it's probably going to be harder than I might be expecting, but I still want to do it. Like I mentioned earlier, me and my best friend, who have more than a decade of experience in coaching, we're launching a program to help people get started in January next year. So definitely, if you want to know more about that, reach out and we can talk more about that as well. And with that said, have an amazing rest of the day, wherever you're watching from. And I'm excited to um, keep doing this. It's been really fun to have you, Robin, and it's been really fun to just doing this podcast all together. So see you all next time. Bye.
See you.